And welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool facing off against Chelsea in yet another massive Premier League game this weekend. I mean, I was going to put in all my pre-match stuff about how this is going to be a massive occasion. It's going to be incredible. You know, the banners and everything. The stadium is going to look absolutely electric before, during and after the game. And then I just kind of realised that that's almost taken as read with every single game, certainly at Anfield between now and the end of the season, no matter what the opposition. You know, the next game at Anfield after this is against Huddersfield, who are relegated already. And normally the atmosphere for that would be pretty tepid. But because of the situation we're in, every game from now until that very last day against Wolves is just going to be incredible to watch. It's going to be a huge occasion. And obviously it's only ramped up by the fact that it is against Chelsea, who are going to be a pretty difficult team to face off against as well. And of course, with it being the title run-in, with it being at home, it is of course bringing back all those memories of the 2014 game. And I've seen plenty of articles about it already, and people have even asked Jurgen Klopp whether it's playing on his mind. And I think, to be honest, that's absolutely mad. I think everyone's just trying to engineer this narrative about how history is almost going to repeat itself and Liverpool have got demons to banish. But I think Jordan Henderson is probably the only player in this Liverpool side who played in that game against Chelsea. Certainly the only player who even had any sort of role to play in the 13-14 title charging side. So I don't think it's playing on anyone's minds really at all. I think even Henderson himself is probably going to put it to the back of his mind and not really think about it. I think it is just another case of the media trying to engineer all these narratives around the title race to make it even more interesting, even though, to be honest, it's pretty exciting regardless of what kind of stories you try and throw into the mix. It's kind of similar to how everyone's always talking about how you can feel the tension on the pitch. The Liverpool players, they look nervous. If you ask me, they never have. At no point in this season, even when they've played badly, Liverpool haven't looked nervous. They've looked bad, they've looked off the pace, but they've never looked like they've let an occasion get to them. And I think anyone who believes in these kind of narratives where the players are going to bottle it, I think is absolutely bananas, because we've seen enough of this Liverpool team so far this season to see that's not really in their blood. And yeah, it's possible they may go out of the Champions League and they may not win the Premier League. But under no circumstances do I think that will be down to them bottling it or choking or throwing it away. I think it will just be down to the fact that we are up against some absolutely fantastic sides in our fight for those two trophies at the end of the season. So I don't think the 2014 game even comes into it at all. I think maybe for the fans, obviously, there's a little bit of it there, but there's so much optimism around the club at the moment, and I think the fans are also invested in this whole idea of the team not being bottlers, the team not letting the occasion get to them, and the team just getting the job done week in, week out, as we've seen with all these late wins and stuff like that, where they've ground it out, they've always found a way to win. That I don't think the fans are going to feel the nerves either. I think the fans are just going to go into this like they did for the Spurs game, or the Southampton game, or the Porto game, and just think, you know what, this Liverpool side is probably, as usual, going to get the job done. And obviously, there's the added spice of it being on the same day as Man City playing Crystal Palace as well. Who knows what's going to happen there? I personally am a little bit optimistic. You know, I think Palace could come away with something. City, when they wobble, they tend to wobble pretty strongly. It's one of the few weaknesses of this Pep Guardiola City side. We've seen it already this season. When they lose, they tend to then lose again. They kind of lose their footing a little bit. So it's possible after the poor result for them against Spurs in midweek that they then stumble again. I certainly will have both eyes glued to that game before R1. And of course, that could play into the narrative as well. If either Liverpool have got to win to then go above City again, or possibly Liverpool could win and give themselves a chance to actually put themselves in the driving seat for the Premier League title. So there's going to be plenty of narratives flying around this game. The press are going to try and put so many stories into it. They're going to try and turn it into this huge blockbuster. But if you ask me, the players, and crucially the Liverpool fans as well, and the management staff and everything, are just going to treat this like any other game. And if we do that, then I'm pretty sure we will come away with a solid result. So a little bit of team news going into the game. Obviously, the player that everyone's desperate to see return, Joe Gomez, is still, according to Jurgen Klopp, not quite ready for this game. It's sort of weird the way he talked about Joe Gomez. I think he was kind of hinting that this is the worst possible time to actually try and bring someone back into the side, because every single game means so much that you can't really take chances. You can't really take your foot off the gas. So even like the game against Porto, it's possible in that game that we could have maybe brought Gomez on for the last half hour, because the game had pretty much died off by then, and he does need minutes in first team football to get himself back up to full match fitness and be sharp enough to actually start games for us in the run-in. But even a game like that, you can't, like I said, afford to take your foot off the gas. You've got to be giving 100% all the way through, and it's going to be like that until the end of the season. So it's difficult really to say how much football we are going to see from Joe Gomez. I certainly don't think he's going to play any role in this game. You know, possibly maybe the away game against Porto, because if we do well in that and we score maybe a couple of early goals, then that will be the tie pretty much done and dusted, and maybe he gets a little bit of a role to play there. But apart from that, it's going to be very difficult to see where Joe Gomez's football comes from between now and the end of the season. And I think certainly a game like this, you'd be mad to throw him in the starting 11. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to see him play in this game in any capacity really. Other than that, Jurgen Klopp also had a little bit of a chat about Naby Keita. He seemed very, very happy to talk about him, which obviously is a good sign, because there's been all sorts of, again, I'm talking about narratives around Naby Keita, people trying to force through stories that it hasn't worked out for him, trying to make up this idea that Liverpool are even going to move him on in summer and take a hit on the price tag and stuff like that. I don't think any of that's true, so it's just great to see Jurgen Klopp talking about him, talking very positively as well. He seemed pleased with what he saw in the last few games and kind of talked about how Keita's now starting to just build up a little bit of momentum. He performed well against Southampton, and that was kind of informed his inclusion against Porto as well. Obviously scores against Porto, performs well against Porto, so Jurgen Klopp is clearly happy with what he's seeing from Keita, and we'll probably be seeing a bit more of him now for the last few games of the season than maybe we have over the last few months. So team news, I mean, injury wise, we're doing pretty well considering that this is such a crucial stage. You know, the last thing we want is to start seeing players dropping like flies, and you know, the starting 11 and the subs all seem fit as they possibly can be, so that is absolutely fantastic. As for how I think Liverpool are actually going to line up for this game, I think obviously, you know, Alisson Becker in goal. We're not even going to entertain the idea that anyone else would play there. The centre-back pairing, I think, is probably going to be Virgil van Dijk, obviously, and Joel Matip. I think while I was pleased to see Dejan Lovren back in the side against Porto, and personally I prefer him over Joel Matip, certainly prefer him over Joel Matip in a partnership with Virgil van Dijk, because I think the two of them complement each other better, Lovren and Van Dijk, than when we see Van Dijk and Matip. They seem to kind of sometimes almost get in each other's way with the way that they defend. I think the goal we conceded against Southampton was certainly an example of that, where they're both playing very, very similar roles, and as a result they leave spaces in the defence, whereas Lovren and Van Dijk are actually pretty different players. And also I think Lovren is happy to just take orders from Van Dijk and do what he's told at times. But because Lovren obviously came back into that game after a very, very long layoff, like over 3 months or something like that, I think it would be a bit mad to start 2 games in a row. I'd like to see it, and if the sports science people think he can do it, then absolutely fine. But given he's got a little bit of a record for burning himself out, he hasn't, I think, played more than 7 consecutive games in a Liverpool shirt without then having to take some sort of rest through picking up knocks and muscle injuries and stuff like that. So I think it's likely that Joel Matip will be the sensible decision to partner Virgil van Dijk in defence. The full-backs, obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold is almost definitely going to play at right-back. Andrew Robertson then is going to be nailed on at left-back. It's going to be great to see him back in the side, because I do think we missed him against Porto. I think while we played reasonably well, we still had an attacking threat. I don't think Sadio Mane was quite the same player without Andrew Robertson, and we were missing that kind of wide player on the left who could create a little bit more space. And obviously, as we know, the full-backs are so crucial to our system that when they're missing, it does affect us a little bit. So great to have Andrew Robertson back in the side. The midfield then, I think, is going to be Fabinho at the base, because I think his job is basically just going to be to literally and metaphorically stand on Eden Hazard at times to stop him getting through. And then either side of him, I think you have to play Henderson in a more advanced role again, because he was so brilliant in that role against Porto. And then the other side, I think you probably go with Gini van Wijnaldum, even though Keita was so good against Porto. And also, you've got the whole argument that you need a creative force in midfield. And in the past, in these big games, I think it was against United and against Everton as well, we played the midfield of Hendo, Gini and Fabinho. And it didn't really work because they were all playing very similar roles, but I think now it's been established that Henderson is going to be box-to-box, is going to play further forward rather than almost partner Fabinho as a central defensive midfield duo. I think we actually have a lot more going forward with Henderson in that more advanced role, and obviously Gini van Wijnaldum always seems to perform well in these types of games. So I think we go with that midfield. It's possible we see a Keita or a Lallana in there over maybe Gini van Wijnaldum. I think Fabinho, like I said, because of the role he can play defensively, he almost has to start. The same with John Henderson because he's been so good, and obviously Gini van Wijnaldum's Form hasn't been so great as late, but like I said, he always performs well in these games, and I think the balance there, certainly from the start of the game, is absolutely bang on. And then ahead of them, of course, you have the usual suspects in the front three of Salah, Firmino and Mane. So taking a little look at Chelsea, then obviously, I think we all know a fair bit about them. They're not exactly a mystery side. We know a lot more about them, certainly, than we did about Porto. I think their main player, the man we're all a little bit worried about, is Eden Hazard, because A, he's a solid footballer, you know, not better than Mohamed Salah. That's been a weird debate that's come through this season, but certainly a solid footballer, and on his day is absolutely fantastic. And when Chelsea come to Anfield, that tends to be Eden Hazard's day. You know, he loves reserving a masterclass for these games against us at Anfield. God only knows why, but that's just how it seems to be. So I think he's definitely going to be their main outlet in this game. And Jurgen Klopp did hint in his press conference at having certain plans specifically to stop Eden Hazard, talking about how he thought about it in training and how he probably will come up with some sort of method of reducing the effect Eden Hazard has on the game. And that's why I think, you know, Fabinho will probably play a role in that, because I think Chelsea are probably going to look to counter-attack rather than dominate possession, and because of that, obviously they will also have Higuain as the target man. But if they want to then get Hazard to influence the game, he's probably going to have to come a little bit central and almost play in the hole behind the striker rather than play out on the wing. So I think that's why we probably will look to have someone in the midfield, literally, like I said, stand on him, both metaphorically in terms of where they are on the pitch, and also literally in terms of just kicking bits out of him at times, because it's a treatment that Eden Hazard is subjected to a lot, and there's a reason for that, because that's the best way to try and stop him. And if you can get away with it, if you can get away with it without the referee picking up on it and sending anybody off, then that's probably the best way to deal with him. So I can see something like that happening, because like I said, he is their biggest threat. And in terms of how they're going to set up, like I said, I think they probably are going to try and counter-attack. I don't think they're going to go to try and go gung-ho and match Liverpool. They learnt their lesson when they tried to do that against City in the league and lost 6-0. I'd love for us to do that at the weekend, but I don't think Maurizio Sarri is going to be that naive again. I think what we're going to see is something similar to how they set up for the game against Chelsea. They then played a few days later in the League Cup final, where they were very, very solid defensively. We've seen Sarri's Chelsea do that in the past. I think even the game against them at Stamford Bridge earlier on in the season, they were pretty well set up to try and neutralise us. So that's how I think they're going to play. They've obviously got some great defenders in that side, in Azpilicueta, Rudiger, and a slightly resurgent David Luiz as well. Although, of course, a lot of those players did play in the Thursday game against Slavia Prague. Eden Hazard only got 30 minutes. He came on as a sub, but other players like Jorginho, who I think we are going to have to target as well, because his legs are probably going to tire. He's not quite used to the pace of the Premier League. Rudiger also played the full 90. Luiz didn't play at all. I don't think he even came off the bench. But Alonso and Azpilicueta both played the full 90 as well. So I think what we've got to be careful with is patience. And it was our downfall in the game against Chelsea at Anfield all those years ago in 2014. I know I said it doesn't really come into it, but there are some parallels that can be drawn in terms of how both sides are going to set up. In that game, Chelsea knew we were going to try and hit them early, and they set up to frustrate that, and that essentially ended up becoming our own undoing. We pretty much just ended up constantly shooting ourselves in the foot all the way through the game because we lost our heads. That's not what I can see this Liverpool side doing. We've scored so many late goals through fitness, not just through being jammy, but through constantly just persevering and waiting for the opening to appear. And like I said, with Chelsea having played on the Thursday night, their legs are probably going to go at some point. And if we are able to capitalise on that, and that's why it's also important that I think Salah came off against Porto. I'm pretty sure Firmino or Mane, one of those two, got a little bit of a rest as well. So they should be able to do the full 90 comfortably. So I think it's just so important that we're very, very careful and methodical at times in this game, and just make sure that we don't lose our heads and know that the opening will probably come at some point. And then, of course, it's always just a matter of taking your chances when they come. That's worked for us so far in this run-in. Fingers crossed we can do it again this weekend. I think it's going to be a fantastic game, an interesting tactical battle as well, and one that I reckon Liverpool will win, although once again I don't think we're going to make it easy by any stretch of the imagination. Let me know how you think it's going to go down in the comments below. Apart from that, that's all for the pre-match video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, as always, hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Sunday evening after we've hopefully smashed Chelsea and maybe even gone clear at the top of the Premier League table. Until then, bye for now.